All right, so I have brought my photos into Lightroom. All I did was import my photos and then get them set in Lightroom. And you can see I've already actually sorted a few of these photos. So all I do is I use the rating system, the star rating. And if I want to go, I can look and I can shut my filter off. And you can see here, because shooting continuous today outside, you can see I have a lot of photos. So it really helps to go through and just sort these down. And this is simply clicking on a photo. Yep, I like it. Nope, I don't like it. Nope, I don't like it. And you just kind of go through like that, as you'll see. So my computer's running a little slow, but and then I just click on the rating, and you'll see I have different stars, different star levels. And the way I go through and rate, it's kind of I could use this photo for possibly needing to bring in elements. Like the label is perfect and clean in this, so I gave that a 3-star. Again, I like the label has a little bit more water on it. You'll see. Look at that focus. And so I might want to use that over the previous one. And then this one has even more water on it, and I really love how the water's running down that. So honestly, this will probably be the one I use if I want to bring something back into the lens. So I'm actually just going to get rid of the first two right there. So that's kind of my sorting, and I go through and I just kind of do that. This photo, there's certain elements like this splash, and again, when I'm first doing my initial pass, I don't have an exact idea of what photos I want to keep until I see everything. So then, as you're seeing now, I'm kind of going back through and saying, oh, okay, yeah, I would keep that photo. This one, I like the one I just showed you better, so I'm going to get rid of this photo. And I like to kind of whittle my photos down to as few as possible, and then I'll start my editing from there. And you can see that the light is actually, I mean, I have no settings applied to any of these, and you'll see it's actually pretty good in terms of a lighting standpoint. I'm going to definitely do and show you some things I do just to kind of get the look that I'm going for, but I won't need to do too much, luckily. So I really like the splash on the table, so I'm probably going to keep that one. Um, I don't know if I can decide between the two. This one, I remember looking at this, and I love all that's going on in here. And there's a lot of bokeh actually starting to happen on the water drops. And all bokeh is the way light interacts with your lens. So you'll have little glimmers, and when they're out of focus, it creates those kind of globes, those orbs, if you will, and that is bokeh. A lot of people, I think, confuse bokeh with just blurriness in the background, but it's actually the way the light interacts with the lens and creates these circular shapes, and that is bokeh. And it's B-O-K-E-H, so it's spelled a little weird, but if you ever see that, that's what that is. I liked this photo. It was just the water droplets are on there, but you'll notice actually you're starting to get some run in the ink, and then after this, I believe this one, yeah, so the label starts to get pretty bad. So if we use any of these photos here, I'm actually going to replace the label with something where it's a little cleaner. And I'm only doing this, honestly, if I was just using this for Instagram, then I would probably just do that. But I'm showing you kind of how you can do a product shot. If, say, I was going to deliver this to a client and they were going to use this for something, I wouldn't want this label to be all messy. So if this was an actual paid gig, which it's not, I liked this one, but I think when I went through it, I was like, oh, this is cool the first time, but after seeing it compared to some of the other ones, I'm going to get rid of that. This one, love it. I love that you're not getting those banded lines from the hose, and it actually just looks like a rainfall over here. You'll see not a whole lot going on in here, so if I do use any elements of this, I'm only going to use these parts. And the cool thing is you can still perfectly read these numbers, which is pretty neat. Really like the splash and everything going on in here. Again, we'll definitely want to put a different label on. This one isn't as bad as this one because this one's a little bit more splotchy. But this one's uniformly wet on the label, so honestly, you could probably even do without doing any Photoshop to that. But we'll see what that looks like. Really love the depth of field we're getting with the water droplets here. And this is why I wanted to shoot kind of midday when the sun was at its brightest with this photo, because I wanted to catch those little bits. And you'll see in the photo coming up, I actually got a little bit more of the rainbow effect. This I was shooting at a higher intensity of the water, and it definitely shows. Even though I was shooting at 500th of a second, you're still out the fast speed of that water. You're still getting some of those lines. But I love these splashes, and actually I could probably take this splash and bring it over here if I have one in another photo. Let's see. Yeah, see, I actually probably just use this from that and combine these two photos. I really, actually this one on its own is almost perfect, and then I might clean up the bottle in here and use some of the ones where it was getting some splash in here, because I'm not getting a whole lot of action on the bottle. But you'll see this is the benefit of using a tripod. The bottle doesn't move. See, I might take, actually I think I might take this section of this one, apply it to this photo, and then I think this label, and apply it to that photo. So I think that's going to be my 3 I'm going to use. That one's not bad, but I'm going to get rid of that one. What I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my color balance, and I think my color is pretty decent. I always like to add a little yellow, but honestly in this case I don't think it's necessary, and the blues actually help with the water. It's a little green, so I'm just going to pop up the magenta, and you'll see just a couple spots. I think it was 14 originally, and you can, I mean, that's the original shot, before, after. It's a very, if anything, very subtle difference. I'm actually going to bump the exposure up just 0.23, I guess, and then I like to bring the contrast up of these photos about 10, just to give a little bit, and then I'm going to bump my highlights down, I guess about 23. And all that's going to do, now you'll start to see some differences. See how that, it just kind of evens everything out a little bit. And not that I like all of my light to be very even in the whole photo, but for what I'm going to do in a minute, I'll show you why I like to have that even light. So right now I'm kind of flattening things out a little bit. Now I'm going to bring my shadows up. I like to bring, not a lot of shadows, I like to bring my shadows up a bit. And you'll see that really starts to flatten everything out. Now everything is very flat. The light is very flat in this, whereas the before, you definitely have some contrast. But the reason I do that is because the whites and the blacks. The whites, I'm going to bump these up a little bit so that the white of the label is pure white. I don't want that to be a gray, because when you bring down the highlights, it introduces a gray undertone, and you can see I want that, since it's a white label, I want it to be a white label. And then I'm just going to make these blacks more intense. And so I'm going to bring those down to about 35. Now, what that does is it basically looks like it just adds more contrast to it, but really it's taking the black points in the photo, and you can even see it here on the histogram. Watch what it does. See all those? It moves them, all the elements down a bit. I only want to go to 35. And the reason I brought the shadows up so much is because if I kept these where they were, now my photo is really dark, and I don't personally want that for this photo. So now that's before and that's after. It's not much. It looks like I did a lot more work than I did, but it really, you kind of see like there's a little bit of flatness in here, and then now it just has a higher contrast. For this photo, I don't do this too often, and this is actually a new feature. This texture, I'm actually going to bring this up to like 20. And then I'm going to bring the clarity up to like 10. I don't do that a ton, but because I'm dealing with all these little particles, that's just going to really help emphasize all those little bits. And you can see it kind of sharpens the image up a bit, which we don't really need. We have really nice focus in this photo. And then I don't touch dehaze. I like to bring vibrance up to just like a little bit, just like 10. Just kind of adds, or 12 I guess, just adds a little bit of like saturation, a little bit of oomph to the colors. For this photo specifically, I actually don't need to mess with much else, but I'm going to play, I'm not going to mess with my curves. You can kind of bring these down to really, but actually I don't mind that. I know I just said I don't want a super dark photo, but I actually, the way the light is hitting this bottle, it's actually not bad. I might do a little bit of an S-curve, bring that down there, and then kind of bring the highlights up there, and I can show you what that does. Again, just kind of, actually in this case, kind of flattens it out a little bit, which I sort of like because I want, and because I know this photo coming up is pretty much getting rid of my background, I want it to kind of give a little bit of a flatness. Like I don't need the background to be super dark to pop the bottle forward. So saturation wise, I think I'm going to bring down the green just a little bit because we're not really going to see that background too much, so I'm not concerned about it looking odd. I'm going to bring up the orange a tad, but we already have our orange. It's pretty saturated in the bottle itself. And then I'm going to bring up the blues quite a bit because the old Potrero, the label being the blue type, and then actually there's a lot of blue in this water you're seeing right here, a lot of aqua actually. So you see how that starts to look really fake. I'm actually going to bring that down to about there. Let's go 25. And then, let's see, we have any magenta. Sometimes if I'm curious if this is even in there, sometimes magenta, you'll have like the lens will do some funny things and add purples and magenta in there. I don't think we're really getting a ton in there, in the label a little bit, so I'm not going to mess with my magenta too much. And that's all I'm going to do. That's pretty much it. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to select these 3 photos, hit Shift-Command-S on my keyboard, and I'm going to synchronize my settings across all 3 photos. So that way, when I'm going back to edit, I know they're consistent. Let's see what we did. Now I'm probably going to have to make some adjustments. Yeah, so this is way too blue. So I actually think the blue saturation level is way too high. Because I do not want my water to look like that. I want it to actually look like water and not marine land blue something water. I'm just going to play and see what my clarity looks like. Yeah, see, I'm just going to bump that up a bit because I'm not using the bottle, so I don't really care what the bottle looks like in here, but I want to get this sort of like cool, like very contrasty feeling in the water drops themselves. And I think I'm going to do the same over here and just bring a little bit of that in because I am going to actually use some of this, but I really want to make sure you see that. All right, so now I have the 3 photos I'm going to use. All right, so now we have our photos exported, and I've brought all 3 images into one file and stacked them on top of each other. So you can see if I click, the bottle actually stays in the exact same spot, but the splashes and everything else changes, which is exactly why we shoot on a tripod so that we can do this. And when I'm working with unpredictable elements, again, I don't do Photoshop really that often on my photos, but if I'm doing something more like this or working with fire or smoke or just more involved setup photos, I want to have that option available to me if I decide down the road that I didn't get the shot in one photo, which is almost impossible. Sometimes it happens, but it's very, very difficult to do, and almost always you want to bring them into Photoshop and kind of combine. I would say for 80% of the photos on my Instagram page, it's one shot. I do it all in camera and really get everything in camera. So this is our background layer. This is the photo that I said is probably going to be our base. It has the most going on. I really like all this coming up here. I like the color that this is. Very engaging. I'm just going to reorder that. This is going to be our next photo. I'm going to bring some of this element into the one below. And then this is going to be the photo for the bottle if we can make it look not super fake, which I'll show you some ways to do that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a mask, and we're just going to hold Option and click, and that actually gets rid of it, puts a black mask over top. I'm going to use my brush tool by clicking B, and I'm going to make that a little bit bigger, and you'll see I have my hardness pretty much set to 0. And my color right now, I'm going to switch to white so that I'm going to paint in, you'll see the photo below it. Okay. I'm going to start to paint in those elements that I liked from the other photo. And if we get rid of anything we like from the base photo, we can easily get that back. And I'm blending this in because I don't want to get rid of all this cool stuff going on. So now you'll see we pretty much have, and you can even see here in the mask, we pretty much have the top portion of that photo. If I click that, you'll see you can't really tell a difference. Now, what I do see is I actually like this little interaction of that photo better. So click on my mask, go back to the black color because that's going to paint it back in. Bring this down, and I'm actually going to paint that right back in. And because we have the hardness pretty much non-existent or set to 0 on our brush, it will do a good job at bringing in those elements and blending them nice. And because we were using a tripod, our bottle's in the exact same spot, so we don't have to worry about aligning the image or getting anything to be perfectly set up. And I'm just going to I can see down in my mask, there's some little bits over here. I'm just going to kind of bring those out. And I like where that's headed. Okay, now we're going to look at this photo, and I think I'm going to just give it a go. Click on that, hold Option, click on Mask, switch to the brush to white, and I'm going to paint in, I know I liked right here on that bottle. Okay, now you can see it still is looking pretty good. Like, you can't really tell that these are different photos. I'm going to paint in the label. And you'll see again, it's just brightening that up. Now I can kind of tell though that it's not really the one photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to get rid of the edges. And typically what that is from is like the edges. See how, if I zoom in, see how right here kind of looks a little funny. It just looks like, why is there water missing right here? And that's because the feathering is kind of coming over and bringing a little bit of that in. So I'm going to get back my brush, and I'm just going to paint that photo back in just a little bit. Now see, it kind of blends a little bit better. I'm just going to go around the edges. And again, because we're using the tripod, I don't have to worry too much about that. Okay, I like the edges being a little bit darkened on there. Kind of see. This is where you're looking for those imperfections that are actually okay to have. Oops. I'm going to get a clone stamp tool really quick just to get rid of some of this distracting element right down here. And this is pretty much the extent of my clone stamping that I like to do in my photos. Again, I like to get as much as I can in camera just to really prevent having to do any of this work, because it's just time consuming and I don't have time for that. So I really try. But again, like I said, I'm treating this as if I was delivering this. But yeah, so basically I'm treating this photo for all you guys as if I was delivering this to a client. Now, clone stamping is great to get a base, but then I'm going to do the spot heal tool. And because that just kind of blends the colors a little bit better and makes it a little bit more seamless and less patchy. And there you go. And one thing you can do if, so say I have like this clone stamp job that's, you know, it's so-so. I don't think it's that noticeable right now, but you could come in here. You could come grab your blur tool and just kind of soften that up a little bit. Just to kind of even everything out a bit. And there you go. And here you go. Here is the final image. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Obviously I'm using some higher level equipment in this tutorial, but I will be doing a lot more kind of cell phone related photos down the road, and possibly even trying to recreate stuff like this as close as I can with a cell phone. It's not going to look exactly like this, but you could probably get a pretty cool looking photo with a cell phone as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Hopefully you guys like this. Hopefully you got a lot out of this, and let me know. Give me feedback, and I want to grow, and I want this to be kind of a conversation with all of you, so that you guys can get the most out of this Patreon. And yeah, cheers.